Welcome everybody to the AgView Weekly Market Outlook for the week of July 22nd through July 26th. Today we are lucky enough to have Ryan Moe with StoneX. Ryan, how are you?
Well, I'm pretty good. I don't know if you're lucky if you can see me right now. Actually, you're probably lucky if you're not working next to me. It's Friday right now, and we had a little problem with some Microsoft stuff here. So I fully intended to wake up this morning, get my workout in, and get a shower in, and all that other stuff. But yeah, the world of the internet had different plans for me. So I'm going to apologize to the audience for my scrubbiness right now. But yeah, I it's been a long week here, and it didn't cap off very well with this IT issue at the end of the
Yeah.
week.
Yep. No, that's completely understandable. Hey, you and I were talking before we started recording here, and you guys did a crop tour, and I think it'd be really good if you want to share some insights from that and kind of explain what all your week entailed and what that consisted of.
Yeah. So first off, I mean, I'll definitely admit this is more of a windshield tour. We covered a lot of ground, did a lot more meetings than we did going out actually into fields, and we don't do as nearly as thorough of a job as like the pro farmer crop tour. We don't do anything nearly as in depth as going out and doing those types of pod counts and whatnot. We hosted a group of our clients in Brazil this week, and they wanted to come up and get more of like an ag business type tour. And of course, we cover a lot of miles when we're doing that. The group flew into Chicago, and from Chicago, then they drove from St. Louis to Kansas City and then to Omaha. I'm from Minneapolis and drove Minneapolis to Sioux Falls to Omaha and then hooked up with them there. We drove through central Iowa, zigzagged in and out of the countryside there. And then I departed from them after a visit to the Summit Farm last night, and they finished out their trip and they're headed to Chicago as we speak. And then they're going to a Cubs game tomorrow, so very jealous of them. Um, the observation from the Brazilian group was very one word. It can be wrapped up in one word, which was amazing. They saw, and this gentleman that led this tour has been there on the Pro Farmer Crop Tour twice, and he said he's never seen anything like he saw in parts of Illinois. It was just phenomenal looking crops. Everything around the St. Louis and Kansas City, over to Kansas City, looked very good too. And then up into Omaha looked very good as well. My assessment, from what I could see going from Minneapolis through Mankato down to Sioux Falls, was there's definitely some trouble spots in Minnesota, and those trouble spots are very well documented. Crop doesn't look good in certain areas, but the crop also looks significantly better than I thought in other areas. Um, I don't want to undervalue those that are in those trouble spots, because those that are in those trouble spots, they're in a lot of trouble. And it's really sad to see that. And it's really hard to look at those kinds of things and knowing that, these are family farms, these are family businesses, and big yields are very important to all of those businesses and all of those families. But there's going to be some areas that are struggle spots. However, I will say that those areas were smaller than what I expected to see. I expected there to see more widespread damage. Sioux City is a great example of an area that was absolutely decimated. I was expecting there to be a very long stretch and a very dire looking stretch of crops out and around the Sioux City area, but I was very surprised to see that you get south of Elk Point and it starts right there, and then not too far south out of Sioux City, then some pretty good looking crops start to appear. So the areas that are bad are very bad, but they're also smaller than what I expected to see. Um, Overall, my assessment is that I believe that we do have the full, USDA trendline yield estimate of 181 bushel an acre. I believe that is well within our grasp right now, because the good crops are great, and those crops have strong potential. It's not in the bin yet, fully understand that, But at this point in the growing season, I would say that the nation overall does have full potential to have a good looking crop and a trend line yield crop, if not above. Um, Beans, I'm not going to venture to guess. I've been tricked by good looking bean crops before. I've been tricked by bad looking bean crops before. So to make an estimate on a soybean yield on the 19th of July, I believe is a fool's errand. So I'm just going to have to go with what the USDA numbers are saying right now. If we talk about this at the 20th of August or the 19th of August, we'll probably have a much better idea. But those with any experience in trying to guess a bean yield know that you don't know what you got in soybeans until you're in the combine and looking at the yield monitor, right? At
Right.
least that's how us simpletons in the Western Corn Belt do it. I don't know, how do you guys do it there in the Eastern Corn Belt?
Yeah, it's you're either pleasantly surprised or disappointed. It always seems to be one way or another on the soybeans.
Yeah, I think that wraps up agriculture as a whole, though, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. That's a good way to sum it up. That's for sure. So as that tour kind of went on and we continue this conversation, let's tie it a little bit to basis with as big a crop or trendline yield crop as we're talking about. What implications on basis are you seeing? Are you guys kind of kind of looking in the future and saying, hey, we need to be thinking about this or that?
Well, it's the basis as it goes today is significantly stronger than I ever expected. Two dynamics in the marketplace have taken place, and both have gone far larger and far longer than I ever expected them to. And it's probably longer than I've ever seen in my career ever, which is I was amazed by how short the funds got and how far they did drive this price for both corn and soybeans down. And that in turn locked up a lot of bushels that are still in the hands of farmers. And so, therefore, without the price incentive to move bushels and without the need for cash for some producers, they're sitting in a spot where that showdown continues and the physical cash marketplace has been starved for bushels and yield crop. I read a lot of social media. I go through a lot of, different channels and talk to a bunch of different people in a bunch of different areas of the world, different areas of the country. And we cast a pretty large net with the commercial grain book that we do cover. I know that there's rumors out there that the corn and soybean bushels just aren't there. I'm here to tell you with a high degree of confidence that the bushels are there. They're
Okay.
just not for sale at these prices. And I can understand that from a producer's perspective. It's a very awful predicament to be in, to see where prices were to where prices are today, and to see where that lines up with your P&Ls. So I don't want to undervalue or underestimate or poke fun at that, because that's not a good situation. These prices are not a good situation really for anybody in the landscape. So, but the bushels are there, and even if it's not some people holding a lot of bushels, there's a lot of people holding some bushels, and that adds up to a billion bushels, a billion and a half bushels pretty quickly. And so that's where I do want to start talking. I mean, we've been talking about this, and frankly, the producers have done a better job trading basis than I have at this point, because basis has stayed far stronger for far longer than I would have expected, because I would have expected the give up selling to have taken place at some point. Um, However, I still want off that bus, and I want to be one of the first people off the bus with old crop corn from last year and soybeans, as opposed to one of the last people off. The end users that we work with all have a mindset of, as soon as I get enough corn bought to get me to September 20th or so, I don't need any more corn. I'm going to back out and go to new crop values. Yes, corn is being held off the market. Yes, it's taking a while to get it bought in. However, I will tell you that as a commercial, your job is to buy corn as cheaply as you possibly can, and as much of it as cheaply as you possibly can. That's the job of a grain buyer. And as soon as they get their needs met for old crop, they should get, if they want to keep their job, they should exit the market.
Yeah.
And so we're getting close to those points in certain spots, and we will eventually start to see certain markets getting picked off, and you'll start to see their basis drop very, very quickly, because they don't want to overpay for any more bushels than they absolutely have to. And
Yeah.
so if there is risk that wants to be taken, taking risk on the board versus taking risk on basis seems to be the it seems to be the risk. If they want to take risk, that would be where I would lay in the risk.
Okay. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I'm getting pretty concerned with the fact that, it seems like a lot of people you talk to say there's a ton of bushels out there and we are fastly approaching new crop basis. And whether, if they wait till the second half of August to get those delivered, the elevator has to chew through those. The commercials have to either get them used, get them moved, whatever, before we have this massive flush of a potential trend
Mm-hmm.
line crop. And what are going to be the
Mm-hmm.
implications of that fall harvest basis? How bad is it going to get when we start talking carrying, delivering corn into late August, early September, and then throwing a potential large crop on top of it? Just kind of seems like a double
And
whammy.
that's yeah, and that's to my point of I want to be one of the first people off of that bus, not the last.
Yeah. Yeah. So we, kind of shifting gears to soybeans a little bit. We did see a large soybean sale reported this week, um, for new crop sales, which, it's kind of like finally, is
Right.
are
Right.
we
We've
are
been
we up
waiting and
and
waiting and waiting.
right? Are we up and rolling now, or kind of what's your opinion of that sale? Is that the icebreaker, or is it just a one-off?
I hope so. I was hoping to see some more flash sales towards the end of the week, of which we did not get those. We got the real nice sale on Thursday, but no follow up then on Friday, and that was a bit frustrating to me because what we really want to see in order to get these funds to finally start backing off of their foot that's on the accelerator of the sell, the sell accelerator, unfortunately, is to start to see some of these exports coming around. Now, when we when we dig into this further, even if we had a big book of export sales, interestingly enough, our ownership books for new crop ownership kind of line up with where our new crop sales are. So we're kind of in that spot where commercials don't have a ton of ownership on beans to begin with. So it's not like they're sitting on a big pile of beans that they own. So it how this whole thing is going to play out is going to be a mystery to me because we've never gone into harvest with this poor of a new crop sales book on. However, we've also not gone into harvest with this poor of a ownership book either, right?
Okay.
How does that all play out? I don't know the answer to that. I do know that storage rates and those types of if we have a trend line bean yield, or if we have a sizable bean crop, you know there's going to need that those soybeans are going to need to buy their way into a home. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And that typically does not favor strong basis at that point, right? Because they're going to come out of the field. They're going to need to go somewhere. Where is it that they're going to go? And then storage costs are going to start racking up on those. So that is one aspect of the market here that is very perplexing and will continue to perplex us. However, there is other little green shoots here that we also need to start looking at differently because of the amount of domestic crush that we've recently brought online and the amount of domestic crush that I believe is going to continue to grow. Um, Soybean meal sales are very important, and soybean meal export sales are going to be as important as soybean sales are because when we look at how many beans we're going to crush here in the United States, we need to find something to do with the meal. Otherwise, the world will, or the country will just be awash in soybean meal. And understanding that, I think, 85-ish% of the US crush is handled by 5 large crushers. And those businesses are very well run. Those companies are very well run companies, and those companies are very well aware of the yellow wall of soybean meal that's facing us. And so those companies are going to do a good job of exporting that soybean meal and getting that soybean meal moved offshore in order to kind of regulate the balance of soybean meal in this country. So keep a good eye on soybean meal sales, because those are very important for us. In If you're wanting to be a soybean bull, you're going to want to see good, strong soybean meal exports, and we've seen a decent clip of soybean meal exports lately.
Okay. No, that's really good information. Um, One other thing that we didn't talk about before, but kind of what we've seen in the S&P this week, do you think there's any implications to that or anything that could affect these grain markets with the sell-off we've seen in the S&P 500 since Wednesday?
Yeah, it's the volatility that we wish we had in the grain markets seems to be getting enjoyed by people on the coast as opposed to those of us here in flyover country. But to those people that call this flyover country, I say keep flying, because we don't want you here anyway. Um, I would say that, like, the volatility that's taking place there, there's a lot going on geopolitically here. There's a lot going on, just domestic politics here. Um, and there's also this narrative out there about what the right thing for the Fed to do is in their September meeting. I'm actually in the camp that I don't think we need to see a rate cut in the September meeting. I think the last time I heard, I think 98% of the betting public is betting on a rate cut of at least a quarter point, if not a half point, coming up in the September meeting. I don't believe we're there. I don't believe we need that yet. And so when we see the volatility taking place, just because we're down right now doesn't mean that it can't come roaring back. Also, something that's at play there is those big, heavy tech stocks like NVIDIA. If you look at how the rest of the market has performed and you take a handful of the big leaders out, maybe the market hasn't performed as well as some of these indexes are leading us to believe. However, when you look at unemployment and when you look at how hard it is to hire employees for your business, that stuff still hasn't gone away, right? And
Right.
when you look at inflation, I mean, it still feels pretty damn expensive to me every time I want to go do something,
Yep.
right? So I don't feel like all of that is behind us, and so I don't want us to end up in a position where they cut rates prematurely, and we don't get into a position to where this to where we really start to cool inflation off. Now, there's listeners that think the Fed's doing a terrible job. I'm actually one of those that thinks the Fed is, considering the kind of crappy cards the Fed has to play with. I mean, they only have a certain number of tools in their toolbox that they can play with. And when we look at the definition of soft landing, the reality of a soft landing is that it takes time and it takes gradual.
Right.
And in a 24-hour news cycle, and again, I'm a content producer, and so therefore I have to be one of those that has to have something to talk about all the time. There's nothing more boring to talk about than a soft landing. However, this is how a soft landing feels, because we're not just burning anybody here from a macro perspective. And so I would like to go ahead and see the volatility go from the equities into the commodity space. That benefits a lot of us more. So I would like to see that transition over to us. However, this does feel like a soft landing, and maybe we are entering into this part of the summer where the soft landing ain't going to be so soft anymore. I just don't know yet.
Right, right. No, I think that's really good insight and kind of adds some good perspective on that. It's nice to kind of hear what people are thinking in some of these other markets too. So as we kind of wrap this up, is there anything else you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Um, we want to continue to focus on demand. This is what, as I've spent the last several months talking to a lot of producers, talking to a lot of commercials, talking to a lot of businesses, both domestically and internationally. I want people to continue to hammer home the importance of demand. If we're talking about our associations, if we're talking to our associations, the question that they need to very clearly and cleanly be able to answer for you is, what are you doing to help improve the demand for the product that the farmers in America and internationally are so good at producing? And we really want to keep focusing on anything that is a positive for the demand landscape, considering the giant mountain of corn and soybeans that we might potentially have to chew through here in the world in the next couple of years. We're going to need a lot of green shoots on the demand horizon. And so I want people to continue to support those initiatives that have to do with demand, because that is what's going to help get us out of these doldrums in these markets. It's what's going to help drive prices higher and make most of the listeners of this podcast happier. So keep focusing on demand. And I think that's going to solve a lot of our problems that we're experiencing right now.
Okay. That sounds good. Ryan, if anybody has any follow-up questions, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, email is the best way to get a hold of me. Now, granted, I have Microsoft Outlook, so I hope it works. Um, I made the joke on our midday thoughts commentary this weekend or earlier this week that I've been getting emails in a very random fashion. So I actually have already received the next USDA report due to this malfunction from Microsoft Outlook. Some people found it funny. Other conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hatters hated that comment. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So no, you can find us on Twitter at Midday Thoughts. We're on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days. But then email is also the best way to go ahead and reach me, which is ryan.mo@stonex.com.
Okay. That sounds good. And thanks again, Ryan, for joining us. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Weekly Market Outlook.
Good luck and be safe this week, everybody.